The fluorescent lights at Mickey's diner always sounded like tired bees. They trembled and hummed above the cracked checkerboard floor, making even the stainless coffee pots look jittery. It was 1:47 a.m., the hour when a city exhales and pretends it isn't lonely. I sat in a corner booth with a lukewarm cup and the stubborn ache that follows you home from a memory you can't fix. I'd been coming here ever since the nightmares returned, ever since the road took my sister and left me measuring my life in quiet hours and refills. That was when I saw the boy. He was small and neat in a navy sweater and pressed khakis, shoes clean enough to cast a reflection. He sat alone 3 booths away, back straight, eyes wide, hands moving in shapes I knew better than most people know their own signature. Please. Help. Water. His face carried a tightness I recognized from hospital halls and waiting rooms, the look you get when you've asked the world to listen and it shrugged. The waitress glanced at him, then away. The cook wiped the counter where the counter didn't need wiping. A couple on their way to the register performed the clumsiest pantomime of not noticing I had ever seen. The boy tried again, faster now, fear pushing his fingers. The hope in his eyes dulled and hardened into something too old for his small shoulders. I stood up before fear could remind me that invisibility is my favorite trick. I slid into the booth across from him and raised my hands. Hi, I'm Emma. What's your name? The transformation was instant. His whole face brightened, as if someone tugged a chain and flooded him with light. I'm Lucas, he signed, eyebrows lifted with the question that breaks me every time. You understand me? Perfectly, I signed back. Are you okay? Where are your parents? He pointed to the door with a tiny shake of the head. Not here. Not yet. Water first. I flagged the waitress with a look that said please
Lucas,
and also don't turn this into a scene. She set a glass down with a clink that sounded like apology. Lucas drank, slow and careful, then signed again, fingers steady now that someone had answered. Thank you. No one knew. The bell over the door chimed and the room changed temperature. A man in a charcoal suit stepped inside with 2 assistants who had the shoulders of bodyguards and the expressions of exhausted executives. Mid-40s. Tall. Composed without being stiff. Watchful without being cruel. Steel gray eyes. The kind that don't miss. I knew his face from headlines. Adrian Roswell. Tech billionaire. Philanthropist. A person people like me meet through screens and think of as weather. He scanned the diner, spotted the boy, and whatever lived behind his professional focus softened into relief so human it hurt to watch. He crossed the room in a dozen long strides. Lucas, he said, not loudly, but with a voice that finds you no matter what. You disappeared. You scared me. The boy's hands flew. She talks like me. Adrian's eyes fell to my moving fingers, then to my face. You know ASL. I nodded. I learned from my sister. Where is she? Gone, I said, the word a small stone. 3 years now. Something shifted in him. Not pity. Recognition. Thank you for speaking to him, he said. Everyone else froze. Deafness isn't a threat, I said. It's a language. His mouth tilted. And you're fluent. He knelt to Lucas's level, signed clumsily but earnestly, sorry, scared, safe, and earned the smallest, proudest smile I'd seen all week. Then he turned back to me. Come with us, please. Talk to me. Professionally. Lucas won't stop signing about you, and apparently I don't stop listening to him. I should have said no. People like me don't follow men like him into stories. We fold our napkins and pay our checks and go home to the tiny apartments we can keep from breaking. But shock tastes like burned coffee the second it decides to become the first domino. I said yes. The ride was quiet in the way expensive cars make quiet. A city at 2 a.m. Looks like it borrowed its lights from the moon. Lucas sat between us and traced the alphabet on fogged glass. I traced it back, slow and sure, and watched his shoulders lower an inch. We passed a billboard for a company that promised speed and a hospital that promised hope and a church that promised everything else. The world loves promises. It remembers about half. I cupped my hands in my lap and thought about my sister's hands when she laughed. The way the air around her seemed to keep the beat. By the time we turned up the long cedar drive, I had a new fear tucked under my ribs. Not of wealth or power. Of what happens when purpose knocks and you're the only one in the hallway. I didn't yet know that saying yes would teach me to breathe differently. I only knew a small boy had been seen, and I had been the first person to see him. The Roswell house rose out of the dark like a secret university, all glass and cedar and landscaped calm. Security cameras tracked with polite attention. The door opened before we reached it, and a woman with neat hair and quiet power met us. Eva Cho, chief of staff. She balanced welcome and filter with one smile. The assistants dissolved into the walls like furniture with clearance. Upstairs, the library smelled like new pages and cedar oil. Lucas perched at a table, swinging his feet, the way children anchor themselves while the adults decide what happens next. A fireplace breathed low. The windows considered the city and chose not to comment. We sat. We spoke like strangers trying to map each other without drawing blood. I told him about Sarah. Born profoundly deaf. Fierce and funny. A gravity that pulled everyone into her orbit. We built a language together, and that language built us. The day a drunk driver ran a red light, the world forgot how to sound right. I kept signing anyway, a promise I'd made to her on a hospital pillow. I still talk to her some nights when the air is just thin enough to carry. He told me about his son. Late diagnosis. Early skepticism. Every expert with a form to fit into and a little box to fail in. He said the words that live under the anger. I kept missing him and I didn't know how to stop. I watched his jaw tighten when he said teachers who never learned to look, doctors who never learned to listen. He signed a little book, Sleep Enough Muscle Memory, from a grandmother who used her hands to stitch meaning into loud rooms. Consult for us, he said simply. For him. Build systems that don't make him choose between being understood and being himself. Translate more than words. I looked at Lucas, who was drawing a superhero with a cape shaped like a hand. What would it look like day to day, I asked. Lessons at home. Protocols for school. Company events with captioning that works and interpreters who aren't treated like props. Teach me too, he added, that soft awkwardness that appears when people admit they're learning something important too late. Eva slid a folder across the table with the smooth competence of someone who gathers storms before they reach the house. The folder said salary and hours and benefits. My heart heard something else. Purpose with skin. The kind of work Sarah would nod at. I asked for a night to decide. He said take 2. I took one. In my studio apartment, I set the contract on the table like a fragile animal. I made tea I didn't drink. I scrolled through old photos of my sister, her in a thrift store prom dress, her teaching me a swear and sign, her asleep with a novel on her chest and the lamp on. I wrote a list titled Reasons to Say No. It had 3 items: fear. 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 Then I wrote a list titled Reasons to Say Yes. It had 1 item: her. I signed. The first week taught me joy can bruise. Lucas knew words. He hadn't been given voice. We began with feelings because you can't build trust without a map for what lives inside. Frustrated. Left out. Proud. Safe. He grew even more precise than he already was. I taught him to name the storm before it swallowed him. We practiced at the kitchen island, in the garden, in the hallway where the sun made rectangles on the floor. Watching a child name the fire is like watching a city turn its lights back on after a storm. The house adjusted around us the way a big ship adjusts when someone shifts the ballast. Chef switched to clear lids so Lucas could see dinner arriving. Housekeeping learned where not to tidy little piles of Lego logic. IT swapped out tablets for ones with better haptics. The head of security, Marco Reyes, measured spontaneity like velocity. Ma'am, he said gently, there are patterns we rely on. Spontaneity complicates patterns. Childhood is made of spontaneity, I said. And his mouth tugged upward like a reluctant season. Understood. We'll build new patterns, he said. He meant it. On day 9, Lucas tapped my wrist and signed secret. He dragged me to a closet where he'd taped glow-in-the-dark stars and constellations only he recognized. He turned off the light and we stood under his night sky. That was the first time he signed love to me. quick and embarrassed like a mistake his hands meant. I signed it back with my whole body. Some words deserve choreography. The internet found us the way the internet finds anything it can argue with. Grainy photo of a child learning a sign became a headline about brand polish. Someone typed a thread claiming my resume was fiction. Another voice insisted I was a prop. I did what I've learned to do with piles of voices. I looked at the one that mattered. Lucas's hand spelling proud with careful concentration. He wanted me there when he used it in a sentence. Eva moved like chess. She documented my credentials, published a concise statement, and shifted attention to what mattered. Accessibility as architecture, not charity. She told Adrian a hedge fund called Torrance Capital had a history of kicking at ankles before earnings and pretending its foot was the weather. He responded the only way that works long term. Build slow. Show receipts. Ship work. Marco hardened routes, vetted staff, added counter surveillance, and taught his team the art of looking without being seen. Me, I taught Lucas how to sign breathe like a metronome. The world knocked. Inside the house, we practiced ordinary. Pancakes and homework in the afternoon lesson where he taught me an older sign his grandmother taught his father. A way to say little wolf with 2 fingers and a wrist turn. We stored it like a secret coin. The Roswell house had its own weather. By the 3rd week, I knew where the morning light bent across the stairwell, where the security team shifted patterns at dusk, and where Lucas liked to draw wolves in chalk on the slate stones near the garden. Ordinary routines had finally begun to breathe, until the first crack appeared. It started at dinner. A table set for 6, though only 4 ever sat. Adrian, Lucas, Eva, and me. The plates gleamed white, the wine was dark enough to catch the chandelier's hum, and the conversation was light, until Lucas signed a sentence that carried too much weight for his small frame. School. Tomorrow. Nervous. I nodded encouragement, then translated for Adrian. He frowned, not at his son, but at the system that had failed him. They still haven't provided consistent interpretation, he muttered. They assign substitutes who can't sign. He comes home with half the lesson missing. I asked softly, have you considered pulling him out? Eva's answer was sharper than any fork on the table. If the Roswell heir leaves, the school's reputation collapses. They want his presence, not his progress. Optics, not responsibility. Silence pressed down. The chandelier hummed louder. I looked at Adrian and asked the question no one else would dare. So what do you want? Reputation or your son? It was the wrong question for polite rooms, but it was the right one for him. His eyes met mine, steady, almost electric. Lucas's hands hovered in the air, sensing the storm. That night, Adrian asked me to walk the grounds. Cedar trees bent in the wind. Security shadows melted in and out of the path. His voice was quiet. I don't know if I've been protecting him or protecting myself. I keep thinking if I control the environment, he won't feel the chaos I grew up with. I stopped. Control doesn't erase chaos, just delays it. He doesn't need perfection. He needs honesty. He needs you in the storm, not outside of it. For the first time, he didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a father trying to learn how. But storms don't wait for lessons. They break on their own schedule. At 6:12 a.m., Eva knocked on my door with the tablet in hand. It's out, she said. A blog post. A grainy photo of me and Lucas under the glow-in-the-dark stars he'd taped to his closet ceiling. Caption: Roswell hires mystery woman with fake credentials. Exploiting child for PR? My throat dried into paper. Words like fraud and plant spread through comment threads like fire on oil. By 7 o'clock, 3 more outlets repeated it, each adding poison. By 7:18, a board member had already sent Adrian an email marked only. Optics? I found him in the library, hands in pockets framed by glass. The city's reflection fractured across the window. He didn't turn when he said, "They're going to tell me to distance myself." I gripped the back of a chair. And what are you going to tell them? This time he turned. His eyes were steel. To bring me evidence. Not fumes. At 8:02, I carried a folder into the boardroom. Georgetown transcripts, Oxford Fellowship letters, Sophia certification modules, rental records from Kyoto when I studied immersion, time-stamped correspondence, affidavits, receipts, every piece of paper the rumor tried to erase. I laid it all down with hands that shook only after they let go. A board member cleared his throat. And the interpreter's story? Before I could answer, Daniel Chun, our senior linguistics advisor, stood. His voice broke the air like tempered glass. My daughter coded blue that night. Your records are here. If anyone doubts me, bring me a Bible or bring me my child's heartbeat. Either is fine. The room fell into silence so heavy it felt structural. Adrian gave one nod to the CISO. Treat this as a breach. Trace. Confirm. Remediate. Disclose. By noon, IT had traced the leak. A private equity scout bribing a junior staffer with whispers of promotion. Trading gossip for currency. Contracts terminated. Access revoked. Counsel retained. And then Adrian walked to a camera. 10 words. Calm. Surgical. We do not outsource truth to rumor or convenience. The market flinched, then remembered what markets always remember: results. By evening, the house felt quieter than it ever had. Lucas curled on the sofa, sketching his superhero again. This time the hero wore 2 capes. One for him. One for me. He signed shyly for us. And I realized what had happened. The rumor wasn't an accident. It was a test. A test of whether transparency could live in a world addicted to noise. That night in my journal I wrote, "The glass question is simple. Will you stay transparent even when it cuts?" But the hours after the leak felt elastic, stretched thin, snapping back in painful jolts. Every minute seemed to carry 2 clocks. The fast one that belonged to headlines, and the slow one that belonged to truth. Inside the boardroom, paper became armor. Each transcript, each affidavit, each time-stamped record was more than evidence. It was proof that silence had never been my weapon. I had spoken, I had studied, I had shown up. The rumor tried to shrink that into a convenient lie. The receipts said otherwise. The silence that followed Daniel Chin's testimony was unlike anything I'd ever heard. It wasn't awkward silence. It was structural silence, the kind that tells you the walls have shifted and the ceiling is listening. For once, even the skeptics in tailored suits leaned back, their arguments stranded. Adrian didn't fill the silence. He let it do the work. That, I realized, is what real power looks like. Not the volume of your defense, but the precision of your pause. When he finally spoke, his voice carried no heat, only clarity. We do not protect this company by chasing shadows. We protect it by proving our light is stronger than their smoke. It wasn't a performance. It was a verdict. By midday, Eva's office was a war room of discipline. No shouting, no panic. Just careful notes, phone lines humming, documents filing themselves into the order of inevitability. I watched her and it struck me. Resilience doesn't look like armor. It looks like paperwork handled by someone who refuses to let the storm dictate the pace. But the truest battle wasn't in that room. It was in Lucas's eyes when he asked in the simplest language he knew, "Why are people angry at you? How do you explain to a child that the world can punish you for being visible?" I signed carefully. Sometimes when people don't know the truth, they believe the loudest lie. Our job is to keep telling the truth until it's louder. He studied me with the gravity only children carry, then nodded once, as if he were filing the rule away for later. That night, after the market steadied and the reporters moved on to fresher fires, the house exhaled. We sat in the living room, the air thick with fatigue but strangely lightened by survival. Lucas curled beside me, his superhero sketch glowing faintly under the lamp. This time the hero had 2 capes and a shield. Adrian stood at the edge of the room, one hand resting on the back of a chair, watching his son's quiet concentration. He caught my eye, and without words said what the day had cost him. Not reputation. Not shares. The cost of realizing how close noise can come to smothering a child's trust. Later, in the solitude of my room, I opened my journal again. The glass question still waited, bright and sharp at the top of the page. I added a second line beneath it. Will you let others see you bleed without mistaking the blood for weakness? That was the lesson of the day. Transparency doesn't only cut. It also reflects. It forces the world to see both your scars and your strength, and decide which it will believe. And as I closed the journal, I knew the decision had already been made. Not by the market, not by the board, but by a boy who gave his superhero a second cape because he believed I had earned one. Eva didn't go to war with fists. Her weapon of choice was the spreadsheet, wielded like a surgeon's scalpel, and she commanded subpoenas with the authority of a 4-star general. She had this rock-solid calm about her, a voice that never wavered, not even when our opponents were counting on us to crack under the pressure. Torrance Capital really cranked up the heat. They moved past simple smear campaigns and started turning concerned citizens into weapons, flooding us with bogus complaints. They were feeding these sensational, but totally flimsy stories to reporters who cared more about drama than actual demonstrable facts. They buried us in paperwork, hoping we'd just crumble under the weight. Their goal was simple: to create friction. Friction just sucks the life out of you, even the most dedicated people. But instead of chasing down every little rumor, we poured all our energy into building something real, something that would last. Something that petty gossip couldn't touch because it wasn't about personal gain, it was about empowering people. We called it Silent City. It started small. We're talking after-school programs where American Sign Language (ASL) was as common as reciting your multiplication tables. We were funneling grants to local theaters so they could add captioning to their shows, opening them up to a much wider audience. Library story times featured tales told with voices and expressive hands. We even designed restaurant accessibility kits complete with picture menus so ordering a meal didn't feel like cracking some kind of secret code. Silent City wasn't just a PR stunt, it was a whole system. It wasn't about surface-level awareness. It was about true access. It wasn't about begging for pity. It was about inviting people to actively participate. The first circle. We filmed the first session in a library that smelled like crayons and carpet cleaner. A room filled with mismatched chairs and a worn story rug that had seen its fair share of juice spills over the years. I watched this group of kids, deaf, hard of hearing and hearing, just having a blast arguing in sign language about whether clouds looked more like sheep or ships. One boy with cochlear implants was playfully teasing a girl with a sparkly headband, admitting her signing was lightning fast but saying he loved the speed. A grandmother, clearly putting in the effort, read from Where the Wild Things Are in hesitant ASL, her eyebrows doing most of the acting, and the kids cheered like she was a Broadway star. For the first time in weeks, I felt this wave of relief wash over me. I wasn't just waiting for the next disaster to strike. That day, justice didn't come in the form of a court ruling. It showed up as a room where every voice had a body. Hands, eyes, mouths. All working together, no holding back. Adrian showed up, fashionably late, with a bag of bagels. The classic peace offering from guys who genuinely want to help but are still figuring out how. He just stopped in the doorway, mesmerized by the kids, and completely forgot about the bagels. Later he told me, "We're not just funding a program. We're investing in a memory that people will carry with them everywhere they go." Scaling the memory. That moment changed everything. We started planning, mapping out our strategy. Our vision included 3 libraries, 2 community centers, and a community garden for outdoor events when spring finally arrived. We trained volunteers, drilling into them one key rule. Know the difference between offering real help and being a hovering nuisance. Hovering steals someone's independence and confidence, while real help makes them stronger. We made sure interpreters were paid fairly for their skills, not just offered the favorable rates our budget used to dictate. And we always had snacks on hand, knowing that kids focus better with something to munch on, and adults are more likely to hang around when their stomachs are happy. Rule number 2. No pity. Plenty of snacks. Silent City grew organically, like ivy, slowly, steadily, wrapping itself around unexpected places, cutting through the noise. Meanwhile, Eva's team was meticulously tracking down the source of the rumors, exposing the puppet masters pulling the strings. She put together this incredibly detailed report, linking every lie back to the person who told it, and every person back to their reasons. Contracts, emails, payment records. A subcontractor who finally refused to take the fall. We delivered this mountain of evidence to the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, the stock exchange, and every reputable news outlet we could find. The talking heads on TV initially responded with sarcasm, but their negativity soon faded away. The real victory, though, wasn't in the headlines. It was in the heartfelt letters and phone calls that started pouring in. A teacher shared that a student who used to be completely silent in class was now raising both hands, eager to answer questions. A bus driver learned how to fingerspell 10 stops on his route, and a little girl's face lit up when he spelled her name. A local restaurant created a kids' menu with picture signs, and parents whispered their thanks between bites of French fries. The world didn't magically transform everywhere, but in specific places things were getting a little better over and over again. Making it stick. Inside Northbridge Technologies, we stopped treating accessibility like a charity case and made it a core part of how we did business. Captioning became the default setting for all company meetings. Interpreters weren't an afterthought. We booked them before we even reserved the meeting rooms. Emergency evacuation drills included sign language practice to make sure everyone was included. HR posted job openings in places where deaf professionals would see them. The IT department added accessibility checks to their code reviews, treating broken captions like bugs that needed fixing. When vendors promised to add accessibility features, someday, Adrian laid down the law. Implement it now, or we'll find someone who can. Some vendors shaped up quickly. The others learned a hard lesson about broken contracts. Fixing the small things. Marco, the head of security, noticed during an evacuation drill that the lights in the back stairwell were flickering. This kind of unpredictable lighting could trigger sensory overload during an emergency. He replaced all the bulbs quietly. No report filed. Leadership is often about solving problems without making a fuss and letting the results speak for themselves. He also asked me to teach his security guard some basic sign language. Are you okay? Safe now. Follow me. These words carry so much weight when they're communicated with both hands and eyes, backing up the information coming over the radio. Measuring what matters. We refused to let numbers be more important than people. So we changed how we measured success. We tracked attendance rates, how long people stayed in programs, and how quickly we replaced hearing aid batteries. We celebrated first raise moments, when a child spoke up for the first time after weeks of silence. We created dashboards for the skeptics, filled binders with inspiring stories for the dreamers, and presented both in the boardroom. Numbers tend to satisfy people who only care about data. Stories, on the other hand, bring back their empathy and understanding. One Tuesday, on a day that smelled like rain, the librarian who had generously offered us that first mismatched room told me that her mother had lost her hearing later in life and had spent 5 years trying to hide it. She whispered, "Silent City saved both of us." Then she gave me a plastic name badge shaped like a book, with my name printed and signed in hand shape. I clipped it on and ran to the supply closet to cry happy tears in private. The truth of Silent City. That night it hit me. Torrents could fill the airwaves with doubt, but doubt doesn't last like the joy of a child laughing in 2 languages. They wanted to wear us down, but we became stronger. They wanted to make us invisible, but we created spaces where everyone could be seen and heard. Silent City wasn't about silencing our critics. It was about teaching the city to listen. And once a city learns to listen, it doesn't easily forget. It happened on a morning that felt as peaceful as a Sunday, even though it was just a regular weekday. Sunlight streamed in through the windows like a standing ovation, painting soft, warm rectangles on the library tables and the stone floor. Outside, in the garden, Lucas was showing one of the new security guards how to fingerspell. He was completely absorbed in it, his brow furrowed like a coach who takes his job seriously, and his lips twitching with the self-importance of a kid who was finally in charge. Adrian was standing in the doorway, his jacket casually tossed over his shoulder, his sleeves rolled up, signaling that he was both dedicated and approachable. He didn't say anything right away. He just stood there watching the boy in the garden, as if committing every detail to memory was too important to rush. "Do you even realize what you've given him?" I thought the answer was pretty obvious. "A vocabulary." He slowly shook his head. "No. A voice. In rooms that didn't even know they needed to listen." He turned to face me, and I saw a complex mix of emotions in his eyes: confidence, a hint of worry, and a strangely hopeful challenge. He wasn't about to pitch a business idea. He was gearing up for something far more significant. "I need to ask you something," he said, his voice now soft and gentle. And I can't say it like some CEO rattling off quarterly goals. I waited, sensing the weight of what was coming. "Stay," he pleaded, his voice filled with earnest desire. "Not as a consultant. Not as a name on some contract. Stay as family. Be his mother. Be my partner. Build this life with us right here." The silence that followed hung in the air, thick with potential. It could have been a barrier impossible to overcome, or it could have been a wide-open doorway to a brand-new future. In that moment it transformed into an opening, an invitation. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly feeling tight. "I'm not some brand," I said quietly, trying to convey the depth of my reservations. "I don't belong on a shareholder slide deck, reduced to a statistic or a logo." "You belong wherever you choose to build," he replied, his voice filled with conviction. "And if that isn't here, I'll help you build it there, brick by brick. But if it is here, I'll spend the rest of my life choosing you back, proving my commitment every single day." He didn't get down on one knee, a tired and cliché gesture. He didn't offer a ring like it was some kind of prize to be won. Instead, he offered something far more vulnerable and risky: absolute certainty, a complete and unwavering dedication. I thought about Sarah, my sister, about promises whispered in a sterile hospital room, promises that lived on even after she was gone, still waiting to be kept, still echoing in my heart. I thought about a young boy who had shared a secret sign, a connection to his past that his grandmother had carried with her through the years, a lifeline in a silent world. I thought about a man who would rather lose face than tell a lie, a man of unwavering integrity. And I thought about the profound peace in our house when the three of us were just breathing together, our rhythms in sync, a silent symphony of connection. "I say yes," I whispered before I could even catch my breath, the word tumbling out of me like a long-held secret. Family signed into being. The timing felt almost too perfect, like our lives were following a carefully written script, the hand of fate guiding our every move. Lucas burst into the room, his face flushed and red from being out in the garden, his hands still moving in the fluid shapes of sign language. He looked at our faces, searching for answers, and grinned, even though he had absolutely no idea what had just transpired, what monumental decision had just been made. He signed slowly and carefully, as if etching the words into the very air. "Are we a real family now?" I signed back, my fingers trembling with emotion. "If you want that with all your heart." His hands shaped the words like sacred vows, a heartfelt promise. "Mom. Dad. Family." His fingers trembled just a little on the word mom, like a small bird tentatively trying to decide whether to land, whether to trust. Then he laughed and cried at the same time, tears of joy streaming down his face, trying to hug both of us, and somehow managing to do it, enveloping us in his pure, unadulterated love. Happiness, I realized in that moment, isn't usually some huge fireworks display, a grand spectacle that lights up the sky. More often than not, it's just finding a place where you finally belong. A safe harbor where you can drop anchor and be yourself. A wedding made of paper flowers. We got married on a Thursday afternoon in the community garden behind the library. Because schedules are important. Sure, they keep the world turning, but symbolism is even more important. It gives our lives meaning. The kids from Silent City made paper flowers, carefully folding and crafting each one with love, which scattered like confetti in the gentle breeze. A kaleidoscope of color and hope. A librarian, a woman who understood the power of both words and silence, led the ceremony, speaking in both English and ASL, her hands moving with grace and precision, like glowing lanterns illuminating the path. We said our vows in 2 languages, but they were really just one promise, spoken from the depths of our hearts. I promised to keep the doors open and the lights on, to create a welcoming and safe space for everyone. He promised to put people first above profits and appearances, even when it didn't look good on paper, even when it was the harder choice. Lucas solemnly placed rings in our hands like a little judge, his face serious and important, and signed "Don't drop them," reminding us of the gravity of the moment. I dropped mine anyway, a clumsy fumble that broke the tension and brought a wave of laughter. We laughed so hard that the vows almost got lost in the joyful noise, the sound of pure happiness echoing through the garden. Eva Cho cried, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, and blamed it on allergies, a convenient excuse. Marco, the head of security, ever vigilant, muttered that allergies were always worse at ground level, a deadpan observation that only made us laugh harder. Nobody believed him, of course, but everyone played along, understanding the need for a little levity. That night the house felt different. Not like some kind of fortress anymore, a place of walls and barriers, but like a home, a sanctuary filled with warmth and love. The security guards, no longer just silent protectors, practiced spelling their names in sign language, eager to connect with the community they served. Parents lingered at the gates, chatting instead of rushing off, forging bonds and sharing stories. The kitchen staff started having a quiet hour, where they communicated only using sign language, embracing the beauty of nonverbal communication. I sat on the back steps, looking up at the stars, the vast expanse of the night sky mirroring the vastness of my own feelings. My life felt like a lung finally taking a full breath. After years of holding back, finally exhaling all the pain and uncertainty. I whispered my sister's name into the night, sending her a message of love and gratitude. The night carried it away, then brought it back softly like a blessing, a gentle affirmation that she was still with me, still watching over me. The world reacts. Not everyone was thrilled for us, of course. Not everyone could understand our unconventional path. An investor sent a polite but pointed email about governance and boundaries, a veiled warning about the potential risks. A gossip blog posted a blurry picture of my ring, supposedly from some distant relative, fueling speculation and rumors. My inbox blew up with messages, ranging from heartfelt congratulations to judgment disguised as concern. A reminder that not everyone wants you to be happy. Adrian sent a short email to the board, clear and concise. We disclose what is material. We keep private what is human. Then he came into the kitchen, rolled up his sleeves and started doing dishes, immersing himself in a mundane task to clear his head and sort out his thoughts. That was what life with him was like. Not grand speeches about values, but values shown in the small things you do every day, the quiet acts of service that speak volumes. The lighthouse of a child. The next morning, Lucas woke up early, his excitement palpable. He stood by our bed like a little lighthouse, shining and steady, a beacon of love and hope. He signed with both hands and his whole face, his expression radiating joy. Good morning, family. The dog, sensing the good vibes, the shift in energy, finally learned how to high-five, a silly trick that brought a burst of laughter. Hearts, it seems, sometimes need silly tricks to show just how full they really are, how much love they can hold. We ate pancakes shaped like continents, a whimsical breakfast that sparked a lively debate, and argued about whether one looked like South America or just a weird boot, embracing the absurdity of the moment. We packed lunches like we weren't loaded like any other family, sandwiches in wax paper, apples with the stickers still on them, a touch of normalcy in our extraordinary lives. It felt real and right, grounded and authentic. Choosing each other daily. Family, I've come to realize, isn't just something you declare once and then forget about, a static label. It's something you choose every single day. A conscious decision to prioritize love and connection. Every time you make breakfast instead of rushing off to some meeting, choosing to nurture instead of conquer. Every time you slow down to sign a word, knowing that understanding is way more important than speed. choosing patience over efficiency. Every time you choose laughter over judgment when it comes knocking at your door, choosing to embrace joy instead of succumbing to negativity. And maybe that's the real secret, the underlying truth that binds us together. The proposal wasn't just his, a moment of grand romance, and the answer wasn't just mine, a simple agreement. It belonged to all three of us, together in a garden, surrounded by paper flowers, with rings and promises and laughter that finally had a place to be, a home to call its own. Life finally learned our names and stopped shouting them. Our days settled into a rhythm. Work, school, the library, the garden, and dinner. A nightly ritual to keep us connected. Some days were scorching hot, like summer asphalt. Others were drizzly and gray like November rain. But the foundation of our life stayed strong. And for the first time in years, stability didn't feel like a stranger. It felt like a warm house with the lights on. At Northbridge, accessibility wasn't just a side project anymore. It was built into the company's DNA. Captioning became automatic. Interpreters were simply scheduled. Like any other meeting. Product reviews always had an extra chair for users with hearing loss. HR advertised jobs on deaf networks, where talented people were actively looking for work. Silence during interviews wasn't mistaken for incompetence. It was respected as thoughtful reflection. Security guards stopped grabbing people from behind, thinking they were being helpful. We turned this lesson into a written policy, so future employees would learn from a manual, not an apology. We put all these rules into a new internal document. We called it architecture, not charity. It started with 3 simple sentences. Charity is a favor. Architecture is a promise. Build promises. The checklists that followed were acts of kindness disguised as logistics. Quiet rooms on every floor. Fire alarms with flashing lights and vibrations, not just loud noises. Slack channels where every image had alt text so everyone could participate. Vendors and lessons. Not all our vendors could keep up. Some adapted and improved. Others faded away. One vendor said, "We'll get to it later." Our response, "Then we won't pay you at all." Another vendor overpromised and underdelivered on captioning, then returned the fee with an apology that sounded like relief. But one small firm, no PR team, no lobbyists, just raw skill, stepped up and delivered. They quietly outperformed everyone else. We amplified their voice and then got out of the way. Sometimes the most powerful act of justice is a contract based on competence alone. Justice is maintenance. Torrance, our rival, became background noise. Just another outrage in the 24/7 news cycle. Like a storm passing over a lake. Quietly, an official investigation began. We didn't celebrate or gloat. Instead, we focused on spreading information about responsible business practices. We kept moving forward. A reporter once asked if we felt vindicated. I said, "We feel busy. Because justice isn't a party. It's a never-ending commitment to maintenance. You don't celebrate fixing a leaky roof. You immediately look for the next leak." Carrying grief beside joy. I embraced a new title that I deliberately left off my email signature. Mother. It didn't erase the pain of losing Sarah. It didn't fill the empty chair she still occupied in our hearts. But Mother sat beside her absence and offered comfort. On what would have been Sarah's 30th birthday, we drove to the river. We carefully folded paper boats, decorating them with tiny hand-drawn wolves and the sign for family on their sails. Lucas saluted each boat as it drifted away. Adrian whistled a wordless song full of emotion. Grief showed up as always. It took its usual seat at the table. But that day it was unusually quiet. It didn't cause a scene or break any dishes. It let us finish the meal in peace. Mickey's Diner. Some nights I still walk past Mickey's Diner. The sign still flickered. The same waitress poured coffee for customers who knew the nuances of their silences. Sometimes I left a big tip, writing "thank you" on the receipt, and tracing a single word on the tabletop with my fingers, a word only I could feel. Sarah. It was my way of saying, I kept the promise. Your language has thrived, spread to classrooms, and offered shelter. Once a man recognized me there. Not from the headlines but from something real. His wife had lost her hearing from chemotherapy. He felt helpless. I taught him 3 signs before his pie arrived. I love you. How can I help? I'm here. He cried openly without shame. He left with hands that finally had a purpose. Loud World. Silent City kept growing. We started a new class called Loud World. It wasn't about teaching deaf children how to survive in a hearing world. It was about teaching hearing people how to be respectful and considerate in environments where silence was common. We emphasize facing people when speaking, waiting for hands to finish signing, and speaking calmly instead of shouting, as if volume could fix a communication problem that only grammar could solve. The class filled up a month in advance, and the waiting list taught patience. And patience, it turned out, is just another form of accessibility. Stories for bedtime. We built a small recording studio in the library basement. Volunteers read picture books in ASL, turning bedtime stories into beautiful poetry. We added subtle sound layers for siblings who relied on their hearing, so nobody felt left out. We made these recordings free online and refused to make money off them. One night, a grandmother from Nebraska sent us a video. Her granddaughter signed along to Goodnight Moon, her eyebrows dancing like waves. I watched the video in the supply closet, the only room that forgave tears completely. Beyond charity toward permanence. That's the power of architecture. It lasts. Charity is a candle flame. Architecture is wiring the whole house so the lights always stay on. We weren't just giving people favors. We were building structures they could depend on without shame or permission. And slowly the city began to change. Signs appeared where they hadn't been before. Bus routes, menus, train stations. Quiet rooms went from being luxuries to being expected. Parents stopped dreading enrolling their deaf children in programs. Justice went from being a fight to being a habit. Closing reflection. One night, while getting Lucas ready for bed, he asked why people still said thank you, when all we had done was make things normal. I explained. Because normal takes work. And as he fell asleep, his small hand in mine, I realized that Sarah had entrusted this legacy to me, though she never explicitly said so. It wasn't about charity or pity, or even a brief moment in the spotlight. It was about building something lasting, a foundation that supports lives long after names are forgotten. And that, more than any official title, was the work I had chosen as my purpose. On the first anniversary of Silent City, we held a picnic in the garden behind the library. The fence was decked out with bunting, as if it knew it was a celebration. Tables were piled high with watermelon, rice salad, and cupcakes that looked like a unicorn had lost a serious bet. Kids showed up from everywhere. Some wearing hearing aids that matched their favorite sneakers, some with interpreters they hugged like family, and some hearing kids who'd picked up enough sign language to tell jokes with their hands and blush at how proud their parents looked. One dad told me he used to dread birthday parties because the noise would overload his kid by the second rendition of Happy Birthday. He said this picnic felt like a song the whole room wanted him to sing along to. A school principal who'd argued with us about the captioning budget a year ago was now asking for our template so he could get more. An ice cream cart vendor learned please and thank you in sign language and sold out of mango pops like a champion. Adrian gave a short speech that didn't feel like a speech at all. He simply thanked the teachers who were dedicating their own time to building bridges in other people's lives. He said the program didn't belong to his company or his name. It belonged to the people who kept showing up and making it work. Eva watched from the shade, counting heads and smiles like she was reading a ledger that only she understood. After the cake, after the chairs were put away, after the last kid dragged a ribbon across the grass like the tail of a comet, Lucas took my hand and signed one more word, carefully, like a beautiful calligraphic flourish, home. I signed it back to him. He even taught our dog to high-five. Adrian washed dishes until his sleeves were soaked up to his elbows. The librarian was crying, but she blamed it on allergies. The sun set. We went inside. Life didn't stay perfect, of course. It found new ways to challenge us, as life always does. There were days when the internet forgot we were real people and treated us like target practice. Nights when Lucas would flinch at a sudden noise, and I wanted to banish loudness forever. Meetings where my job was to articulate the simple, human sentiment that everyone else shied away from voicing, and the ensuing silence was so profound I could hear the frantic rhythm of my own heart. There were mornings when grief would wash over me in relentless waves, like a dense fog rolling in from the sea, and I'd simply sit with it, letting it envelop me, until it gradually dissipated enough for me to gather the strength to move forward. But the fundamental structure of our life, the bedrock on which we built everything, remained unshaken. I can recall with perfect clarity the precise instant when I realized that everything had irrevocably shifted. It was a Tuesday, as unremarkable as a slice of toast. The head of security was out of the office that day. A new guard, who appeared to have only a rudimentary grasp of sign language, stopped by the kitchen to grab a cup of coffee. Lucas was sitting at the table, engrossed in a book about planets, his legs neatly tucked beneath him like a contented cat. The guard gave a tentative wave, paused for a moment, and then haltingly signed a rather clumsy good morning. Lucas responded in kind, his movements slow, patient, and with just the slightest hint of self-satisfied pride. That was all it took. No grand fanfare. No blaring headlines in the newspapers. Just a quiet, unassuming moment where a wall seemed to realize it possessed the potential to become a door. That night, unable to find sleep, Lucas crept into our room and gently shook my shoulder, his touch as delicate as someone who understands the inherent fragility of human beings. We sat together by the window, silently watching the distant city lights flicker and pulse. He signed questions, the reach of which far exceeded the capacity of his small arms. Will I always be perceived as different? Will people ever cease pretending that they don't see me, that I'm somehow invisible? I reassured him that being different is, in itself, a kind of light. People instinctively stare at sources of light until their eyes gradually adjust to its brilliance. He signed brave without even a fleeting glance in the mirror, his gaze fixed on something far beyond his own reflection. We spent time practicing counting the red lights dotting the horizon, likening them to ducks serenely floating on a pond, or breaths taken in the peaceful sanctuary of a park. We solemnly promised to keep count for each other during those times when the numbers began to blur and lose their distinctness. Following that initial anniversary picnic, the narrative didn't simply conclude with a round of applause or a series of posed photographs. Instead, it continued to unfold in quieter, more understated ways, the kind that one could easily miss if they weren't paying close and careful attention. A week later, I observed Lucas in the garden, diligently teaching a group of young children how to sign the names of the various bugs and insects crawling across the grass. His hands fluttered and danced like the wings of a butterfly. Ladybug. Caterpillar. Butterfly. The hearing children diligently copied his movements, their signing slower and more deliberate, but filled with an undeniable sense of pride, and whenever one of them got stuck or confused, Lucas didn't immediately correct them. He offered encouragement and support, nodding his head and smiling until they laughed and eagerly tried again. It was then that I came to the realization that happiness isn't solely about those monumental, life-altering events that we meticulously mark on a calendar. It's also about those ordinary, everyday moments that we carry around with us almost unconsciously, until they eventually bloom within us like seeds we'd forgotten we'd even planted. Adrian arrived home late that evening, his sleeves casually rolled up, carrying with him the unmistakable scent of city rain. He sat with us at the kitchen table while Lucas enthusiastically acted out the constellations with his arms, carefully naming each and every star. Orion. Cassiopeia. The Big Dipper. For a prolonged moment, we suspended all talk of business matters, programmatic concerns, or pressing responsibilities. We simply allowed a young boy to guide us through the wonders of the night sky, sharing both tranquil, silent moments and bursts of unrestrained laughter. That, far more than any official document or charitable donation, served as irrefutable proof that our work held genuine significance and worth. People occasionally inquire about my definition of success, what it truly looks like in practice. I don't launch into elaborate discussions about budgets, front-page news articles, or contracts signed with expensive, elegant pens. Instead, I share stories about a security guard diligently learning to sign "Good morning," a grandmother's expressive eyebrows lighting up with delight as she reads a story, or a child who once instinctively hid his hands now raising them with uninhibited joy, as if they were wings poised to take flight. I explain that success manifests as a family that didn't previously exist, a group of individuals who actively and consciously chose to become one. It's a city that was once seemingly tone-deaf, but is now diligently learning to listen with an open and receptive heart. And it's a boy who no longer feels the need to question whether he truly belongs, because the answer is clearly and unequivocally apparent in every space he occupies. That is the authentic shape of happiness, not some unattainable ideal of perfection or a fanciful fairy tale, but the dependable and reassuring rhythm of being seen, chosen, and cherished for who you are. And if at some point the story becomes distorted or diluted as it spreads, losing its original essence and purity, I will always hold fast to the fundamental truth. We weren't rescued by substantial financial contributions or sensational headlines that grabbed attention. We were saved by attentive listening, unwavering perseverance, and the small everyday acts of kindness and compassion that demonstrate that love, when constructed like a sturdy building, can endure far longer than any fleeting rumor or fleeting moment of fame. Some evenings the garden is filled with the invigorating aroma of fresh mint and the coolness of hose water, and the dog dreams, his paws twitching as if he's chasing a playful rabbit carried by the gentle breeze. The house settles into a peaceful stillness. The city hums and vibrates at a comfortable distance, its presence felt but not overwhelming. Adrian signs family, in the old-fashioned way his grandmother would have approved of, and he kisses my cheek with the gravity of someone who deeply understands the true meaning of commitment and enduring partnership. Lucas uses his hands to create the shape of a wolf on the wall, laughing uproariously when the shadow stubbornly resembles a rabbit instead. Everything that truly matters is small, intimate, and right here in this very moment. If you were to ask me for advice on how to bring about change in a room, a company, or an entire city, I'd offer you the same advice I give to the children at the library when they express a desire to make a new friend. One brave sentence, spoken with conviction. One person who is genuinely willing to listen without judgment. The rest is simply about practice, enduring both the good times and the bad times, and choosing good snacks to maintain your energy levels during long and potentially tedious meetings. We even created a poster with that exact message and taped it in the hallway where leaders walk on their way to rooms where important budget decisions are made that impact the lives of many. We've added new chapters to our story, because life continues to provide us with new books to read and experiences to absorb. Silent City partnered with the Transit Authority to provide captioned platform announcements within the app, making it more accessible to all. A museum hired deaf docents to conduct tours that transformed art into a lively and engaging conversation, rather than a dull and monotonous lecture. A hospital adopted our quiet room, soft light, slow time plan and subsequently reported shorter patient stays, recognizing that calm and tranquility can be a potent form of medicine as well. A middle school incorporated ASL as a language option, and the class had to be relocated to the auditorium due to the overwhelming number of students who wanted to enroll. Popularity can be an incredibly powerful force when it's channeled for good and used to promote inclusivity. We maintain a bench in the community garden with a small plaque that reads, "For those who listen before they judge." People sit there and reconnect with their capacity for empathy and genuine understanding. Occasionally, I discover small, unassuming receipts tucked away beneath it. Bus tickets, grocery lists, a note from a child to himself that says, "You did it today." I leave them undisturbed, feeling as though they serve as tangible proof of something significant and meaningful. On the anniversary of that fateful night at the diner, I returned and walked under the buzzing fluorescent lights with a handful of dollar coins, tipping everyone who had helped make that hour bearable. The waitress, the cook, even the dishwasher whose laugh seemed to subtly alter the atmosphere for the better. I left a note on a napkin, thanking them for allowing a stranger to become a translator, bridging a gap between two worlds. The bell above the door chimed as I exited. The air felt palpably different. The world is brimming with doors that have yet to realize their potential, waiting to be opened. Back home, Eva joined us for dinner, playfully pretending she wasn't a member of the family by bringing an extravagant amount of dessert, enough to feed an entire army. Marco sat at the end of the table, signing slowly, deliberately, and with obvious pride in his progress. He still deliberately messes up the G sign to elicit laughter from Lucas. Adrian told a terrible joke in 2 languages, simultaneously butchering both. I looked down at my hands, and they reminded me of my sister's hands when she was eagerly recounting the ending of a story she couldn't wait to share. I said her name out loud and nobody even blinked an eye. That's yet another way to define what home truly means. Whenever I reach the conclusion of this story, I feel as though I'm transported back to that diner, standing beneath those buzzing fluorescent lights, holding a lukewarm cup of coffee, facing a decision I hadn't even recognized as a decision at the time. The door chimes. The atmosphere shifts. A boy signs for help, and the room collectively pretends not to notice until one person finally steps forward. That's all it takes to initiate change. One person choosing to translate for a moment. One person choosing to be translated and understood. So here's my ending, which is, in reality, simply another beginning disguised in a more polished and appealing form. The house breathes with life and energy. The program continues to expand and evolve. The city learns and grows. We add another library, another bus route that serves marginalized communities, another classroom that embraces inclusivity. We rectify one more form that was based on flawed assumptions and posed the wrong questions. We compose one more email that articulates, "This is important, here's why it matters, and here's how you can help." We count ducks and lights in small, incremental victories. We carefully preserve the receipts, serving as reminders of our journey. We persevere and keep moving forward. And if you're listening to this and find yourself surrounded by a night that feels overwhelming and insurmountable, please hear me clearly. You are not finished yet. Return the thing you were tempted to keep selfishly. Hold on to the thing you mistakenly believed you had to sacrifice. Learn the old signs, honoring the past. Teach the new ones, shaping the future. Nourish and sustain those around you. Share your work even if it feels vulnerable. Embrace the smaller opportunity if it ultimately leads to a more expansive and fulfilling life. Allow yourself to be seen, acknowledged, and appreciated. Choose and choose again, never giving up on the possibility of positive change. My name is Emma Hart. I was once invisible, lost in the crowd. Now I am a keeper of doors, a facilitator of connections. If you happen to find a wallet in the rain, a story waiting to be told, a valuable skill to be shared, a sentence that could change a life, bring it home, nurture it, and share it with the world. Sit on the bench with the brass plaque and observe as the city rediscovers the simple act of breathing, of truly being present in the moment. When someone inquires of Adrian how we managed to achieve all of this, he simply responds, "Attention is the most precious and scarce resource we possess. Spend it wisely, investing it in endeavors that generate more of it." I advocate that you spend it on children, the future of our world. Spend it on truth, seeking to uncover what is real and authentic. Spend it on creating spaces where hands, mouths, and eyes can all be heard and seen simultaneously, fostering genuine connection and understanding. Then carefully observe the ensuing quiet, the sense of peace and contentment that follows, and recognize that as true happiness.